Accepting that people won't think you're really gone is the toughest choice you'll ever make, not leaving. Some folks, let's face it, will never accept your departure. They will tell themselves that you're just crazy, going through a phase, or, my favorite, that you'll return when you've calmed down. They believe that you lack the strength to leave them permanently. You were too immersed in their bullshit, too forgiving, and too devoted to really end it. The problem is that they're spinning because they're not returning. Did you know that psychologists claim that individuals go through a psychological state akin to mourning when they suffer an unanticipated loss, particularly when they lose control over someone? The worst part is that they're lamenting the power they no longer have over you, not you. In their universe, you were never intended to go, which is why they are in denial and find it impossible to comprehend. And they're falling apart now that you have. Prepare yourself because, after seeing this movie, you will know precisely why they are furious, why they can't believe you left, and why leaving was the best decision you have ever made. Let's get started. First of all, they never anticipated that you would awaken from their influence. They didn't expect you to awaken. They shaped your reality for years, maybe even decades, teaching you what to think about the world, about yourself, and about them. They meticulously planned every word, action, and circumstance to ensure that you remained precisely where they wanted you to be. To them, you were more than simply a person. You were a part of their system, a part of their narrative, and they believed they had permanently secured it. Then you woke up out of nowhere. Everything changed when you viewed things for what they really were. Before you said a single word, they sensed it. They were frightened when your energy changed, your perspective on them altered, and the power dynamic broke, because they were in charge of the story until that point. They influenced your self-perception, your interpretation of their actions, and your threshold for tolerance. Then, something inside of you clicked. Perhaps it was a string of little incidents, minor discrepancies that ceased to make sense. Perhaps it was a single, egregious betrayal that was too clear to overlook. In any case, there was no turning back once you saw beyond the curtain. You ceased defending their actions, questioning yourself rather than them, and defending the ways in which they depleted, tricked, and used you. They lost control when you realized the truth. They think you weren't capable of leaving, which is why they find it hard to believe you did. They worked so hard to ensure that you would never have faith in your own power, value, or capacity to leave. You broke the self-image they made of you, which was meant to keep you imprisoned in it. They never anticipated you becoming someone who could no longer be tricked, subdued, or kept tiny. And for that same reason, they are unable to accept that it is finished. Not only did you leave, but you also disproved their assertions. To share the love of the angels, write Amen and contribute up to $20 with a super thank you. Second, they despise you because your absence revealed their vulnerability. They felt powerful while you were in their lives, not because they were strong in and of themselves, but rather because of your presence. They used you as a crutch for their own fears, depleted you, and depended on you. When their lives were falling apart, they turned to you, and you took in their fury, rage, and self-doubt. You were always there to keep them stable, to absorb the emotional blows, to repair the harm they wouldn't admit, so they didn't have to work on themselves. But now that you're gone, they feel weak, not because they lost you, but because they no longer have the authority, approval, and drive they once had. Without you, they are forced to confront themselves, the one thing they have avoided all their lives. They have no one to blame for their shortcomings, and no one to emotionally coerce into feeling whole. They find it unsettling because they know in their hearts that they were never as powerful as they made themselves up to be. It's not just a loss, it's an exposure, which is why they're upset and find it hard to accept that it's final. They are forced to face their true selves without your support, and they don't like that version of themselves. When forced to stand alone, they don't like what they see. However, they would choose to despise you rather than acknowledge it or put in the effort to improve. They may more easily persuade themselves that you are the issue, that you left them, that you were self-centered, and that you have changed. Because they can't face their own weakness if they recognize the fact that they were reliant on you in ways they never acknowledged. As a result, they alter the narrative, act like the victim, and lash out instead. However, none of that alters the fact that your absence made clear what they had been attempting to conceal all along. You were powerful, not them. Third, they believed your willpower was less than their emotional bonds. They used mental control, which is considerably more powerful than physical shackles, to restrain you. They made sure you were terrified of what would happen if you really left, felt forced to remain, and felt terrible if you even thought about leaving. You eventually began to manage yourself for them because they ingrained those ideas so deeply in your head. You remained because they convinced you that you had no other option, not because you wanted to. They persuaded you that leaving would be seen as being unappreciative, self-centered, and disloyal. As if their little efforts were justifications for being mistreated, they reminded you of all they had done for you. Every time you questioned their actions, they portrayed themselves as the victim, making you feel horrible for just desiring peace. What's the worst? It was successful. You began to doubt yourself, feel stuck, and think that maybe you were the issue, that perhaps you were being too sensitive, or that perhaps you were expecting too much. Then, however, something changed. You came to understand that fear is not an excuse to remain, duty is not devotion, and guilt is not love. Their whole hold on you started to loosen the instant you saw it. You started to think critically. You stopped responding the way they wanted you to. And you started taking back your life, your thoughts, and your feelings. Then they went into a panic. They didn't believe you would escape. They believed that their control over you was unbreakable and that their training was forever. They were never prepared for the possibility that you may fight them. And now that you've done it, they're shocked because it implies they only ever had the power you gave them, not actual influence over you. And that control is no longer there. They bound you with shackles for years, but you shattered them. The one thing they didn't anticipate was that you opted for your independence above their control. They now have to face the fact that they never had as much control over you as they believed. Fourth, they are terrified because they are losing their emotional arsenal. They never recognized you as a unique individual with feelings, challenges, and boundaries. You served as a punching bag, a release valve, and a location for them to dump anything they didn't want to carry themselves. They threw everything at you, including personal failures, bad days, and frustrations, and they wanted you to simply accept it. You took it in when they struck out. You consoled them while they pretended to be the victim. You cleaned up the mess they caused. You were always there to bear the burden for them, so they never had to deal with their own problems. And they depended on you more the more you suffered. It was emotional reliance masquerading as a connection. It wasn't love, friendship, or family. Now that you're gone, they must deal with their own mess for the first time. There is no one to blame for their emotions, no one to gaslight, and no one to coerce into doing so. Not because they miss you, but rather because they are unsure about what to do with themselves. They are upset, irritated, and uneasy. They never learned how to really process their feelings in a healthy manner, since they have been using you as an emotional dump for so long. However, they continue to blame you instead of recognizing this and improving themselves. They tell themselves that you were the issue, that you deserted them, and that by declining to continue in your position, you betrayed them. Because if they come clean and say that they were abusing you, and that they relied on you in ways they never admitted, They will have to confront the one thing they have avoided all of their lives: themselves. They can't believe you left because they now have to deal with the same feelings they forced you to carry for years, and they're not sure how to do it. Type Amen to embrace the angel's blessings. Show your support by giving super thanks up to $20. Fifth, you were their life's last positive thing, and now it's gone. They assumed you would always be there, so they took you for granted. No matter how much they took from you, how much they ignored your needs, or how little effort they put forth, you were the one who always showed up, always showed forgiveness, and always gave them the benefit of the doubt. They had no doubts whatsoever that you would remain. Their world seems empty now that you're gone, not because they loved you as much as they ought to have, but rather because they relied on you to complete them. You provided the warmth, stability, and support that held things together while everything else was crumbling. They're coming to terms with the harsh reality that they have nothing left now that you've departed. They were constantly taking your happiness, so they had no idea how to make it their own. They only felt worthwhile when they had someone who was willing to put up with them. Therefore, they don't know how to feel appreciated. They were never taught how to create real relationships, since they didn't have to try with you. You just gave and gave without asking for anything in return. They're now frantically gazing about at the disaster they've been ignoring for so long in an attempt to find someone else to fill the hole. However, they are secretly aware that folks like you don't come along very often. You were the greatest thing they had, and they didn't understand it until it was too late. You weren't interchangeable, and you weren't simply another person in their life. What's the worst? It won't feel the same even if they do find someone else, since what they had with you was based on your willingness to bear the burden for both of you, not on effort or concern for one another. Now that you're gone, they must confront the truth they've been avoiding for years. They have nothing because they never understood the true worth of anything good, and they can't get it back this time. Sixth, you were not taught freedom, but loyalty. They programmed you, not nurtured you. Every encounter, instruction, and expectation was planned to make you become the caregiver, fixer, and emotional support system they need. They loved you because of your value to them, not because of who you were, and they made sure you never doubted it. They made you feel that your greatest duty was to remain loyal, and that it was a betrayal to leave, establish limits, or demand respect. You were coerced into remaining because they made you believe that your worth was determined by how much you could put up with, how much you could sacrifice, and how much of yourself you were prepared to part up. And it worked for a while. You persuaded yourself that maybe they would eventually value you if you simply tried more, loved more, or shown your value. You remained, you gave, you endured. Then, however, something changed. You awoke, saw the pattern, and came to the realization that love shouldn't seem like a duty, that devotion without return is only slavery, and that genuine relationships don't need you to sacrifice yourself in order to make someone else feel comfortable. And the whole edifice they constructed collapsed the instant you decided to choose your independence above their authority. They were relying on you to never see your own power, not simply taking advantage of you, which is why they are now in a panic. You provided them with security, emotional support, and consistency, and now you're gone. Even worse, you are no longer bound by the invisible leash they believed would permanently bind you to them, the guilt or the responsibility. The fact that you not only left, but also that you disproved them, and that all of their attempts to keep you small, including training and manipulation, failed, is what scares them the most. They had to watch you go because you broke the programming, and they know they will never be able to control you like that again. Seventh, their stagnation was threatened by your rise. They feared your progress, not praised it. They were more uneasy as you changed, Not because you were doing anything wrong, but rather because you were demonstrating something they didn't want to believe. They never made the decision to develop. As long as you remained on their level, accepted the same justifications, put up with the same abuse, and cooperated with the same dysfunction, they were okay with you. Not because you changed, but because your transformation forced them to examine themselves, and they didn't like what they found. You became a problem the minute you began to desire more for yourself. They were forced to face a hard reality by your growth. They had the same chances to develop, change, and become better, but they never did. Rather, they remained mired in their poison cycles, comfort zones, and habits. And breaking free was a challenge to their whole life, not simply a way out. They attempted to drag you back down rather than help you improve. They made you feel bad about your progress rather than encouraging it. They branded you ungrateful, selfish, and distant. Anything to make you question yourself, not because they really thought so, but because it was simpler to keep you little than to level up themselves. That's why they find your absence intolerable. To them, you were more than simply a person. You were evidence that inaction is a decision, because it serves as a reminder of what they might have done for themselves, but never did. It now hurts every time they see you succeeding, hear about your pleasure, or see that you're doing better without them. They're upset, not just because you left, but also because your development EXP revealed all the things they didn't want to alter about themselves. And they know it deep inside. Number 14. The first time they ever had to deal with the repercussions was when you left. They had avoided responsibility, made excuses, and manipulated their way out of issues for so long that they had never even considered the possibility of actual repercussions. They believed that you would always be there, that you would always give, that you would always forgive, and that no matter how terribly they treated you, you would always remain. After that, you departed. They also had to confront the fact that their acts had consequences for the first time. Your decision to leave was a critique of their treatment of you, not simply a simple act of walking away. It was the point at which their apathy, manipulation, and selfishness finally caught up with them, and they were unable to cope. Because they were mistaken about everything if you, the one person they always believed they could control, eventually had enough. Not only are they startled that you left, but they're also horrified that they were unable to stop you, that their typical strategies of victimization, rage, and guilt didn't succeed this time, and that despite their best efforts to fabricate the incident, they know in their hearts that they are to blame. They are frightened by it, because what does it say about them if you, the one who gave them many opportunities, remained longer than you ought to have, and forgave them more than they merited, even decided they were no longer worth it? They've avoided repercussions all their lives, but now they're facing one. What's the worst? It cannot be undone. No last-minute act of desperation, no deception, and no apology can make you the person you were before. They miss the authority they had over you, not only you. They must now dwell with the remains of their actions for the first time ever. No more scapegoats, no more quick solutions, just them and the unavoidable truth. Ultimately, your leaving was a statement, rather than just a way out, declaring your refusal to be dominated, abused, or taken advantage of. A declaration that your love, time, and energy are not limitless resources that may be used for any purpose. A declaration that you ultimately made your own decision. And it is what they find intolerable. They never really thought you were going to go. They believed that their guilt trips, manipulation, and feigned apologies would be sufficient to keep you bound. However, you destroyed their sense of authority when you left. You made them confront a reality for which they were unprepared, a world in which they are no longer able to reach you. Allow them to speak, alter the narrative, and act as the victim. The fact remains the same. They lost you, and they did it on their own. and the strongest component. The people that really see you, respect you, and comprehend the depth of what you've gone through already know, so you don't even need to explain yourself. What about those who don't? In the first place, they were never worth persuading. Thus, go on without turning around, because showing that you never required them to be complete is your greatest victory, your greatest power, and your greatest retribution. Live well, develop, and thrive. Furthermore, they will never be able to change it. Don't stop here. If this message resonated with you and you felt powerful, seen, and validated, let's maintain this enthusiasm. This is just the beginning. So click that subscribe button. There is so much more to discover, comprehend, and explore. To ensure that you never miss a moment of truth, clarity, and unreserved personal development, turn on your alerts. Please leave a comment below if this struck a chord with you. Your voice counts. Share your opinions, tell your experience, or just say, "I choose myself." And spread the word if you know someone who should hear this. You never know who could need the last motivation to leave behind what is preventing them from moving forward. Naturally, if this message offered you the clarity and strength you needed, click the like button. After all, each like, remark, and share is more than just an interaction. It's a statement that we're done settling, waiting, and explaining. You belong here, and this is a movement.